Well, let's talk some more about this. Foreign affairs commentator Adam Roosevelt joins me now on the program. He joins me from Dubai. Thanks, Adam, for joining me on the program. Let's begin with North Korea breaking its silence over the country's recent spate of missile tests. I mean, it's been 6 months since we heard anything. Were you surprised?
Well, first, let me start by saying thank you for having me. It's good to be with you. I am not particularly surprised. I do believe that many nations who have been trying to increase their nuclear capabilities see this as a time, especially because we're at the Russia-Ukraine conversation, which really is making some countries bold in their decisions. So I am not particularly surprised. I think that North Korea has been aggressive for a long period of time, and now they have a moment where they can flex their muscles, given the justification that the United States is carrying out joint military exercises, which they would say is an endangerment to their national security.
But what do you think, its announcements today indicates? Do you think it's made potential progress in its missile program?
Well, I will say that, the intelligence community, the Central Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency have been working covertly to ensure that these programs do not continue forward. Obviously, economics is a very big contributor to the ability for a nation to advance its weapons in terms of nuclear capabilities. We've sanctioned North Korea, but if a nation is focused on attaining this level of capability, I do think that North Korea can increase its ability to reach that objective, but I do not think that they have, in fact, been able to accomplish that objective today.
In terms of the international community, which you've talked about, many wonder, how do they see this, and, how have they been reacting to this, and do you think that their reactions have been adequate?
Well, I think the NATO powers and the European Union, they will be one group of nations that will be a coalition to respond against nations that we do not believe should have nuclear capabilities, such as Iran, such as North Korea. So sanctions will be a part of the first phase, and then we would be looking at other things that we can do to limit their ability to reach these objectives. But I think that a North Korea nuclear state would not be a benefit to the West, and I would argue that it would not be a benefit to the globe. So Washington will do all it can to contain North Korea's ability to become a nuclear power and an aggressor, which would challenge Washington's interest.
And the U.S., South Korea, and of course Japan have, had active, perhaps still having active military exercise. Do you think, if something bad were to happen, that they could stop it?
Well, the importance of having military assets deployed, whether they are Army assets or Navy assets, is the ability to deploy countermeasures. And what the United States and NATO partners do is they sell those weapons to those partners, such as South Korea, to be prepared to counter short-range tactical nuclear assets, as well as long-range international ballistic missiles. So I think every country is trying to posture themselves in a higher defense position. But in terms of the advanced ability to acquire those capabilities, it does come with economic and it does come with trust, because some of these weapon systems are classified and they do not allow certain parties to acquire those weapon systems.
But of course, if you were to think of North Korea's defense, it appears to be saying that the latest drill between the U.S. and South Korea is, what is fueling its actions at this time. Would you say perhaps that things have degenerated such that this is escalating and possibly into a real war in the future?
Well, I think what we're seeing is coalitions begin to expand. We've got coalitions in the East that are rapidly expanding with the UAE, the GCC, and Russia. From an economic perspective, we just saw OPEC Plus make a decision to decrease oil output. These are all the different factors that are playing, I would say, contributing to what we see as a coalition expanding its power. Whether we agree or not agree, these things are having causes and effects. based on decisions that Washington is making. Furthermore, the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, just went down to this location, and that could be seen as an act of provocation. So with the Taiwan-China issue and how China sees Taiwan in terms of its territory and the U.S. encroaching, with the exercises in the Korean Peninsula, how North Korea sees South Korea in the U.S. relation. So all of this geopolitically is contributing to each individual nation looking at the West and saying they're encroaching on our territory and they're carrying out military exercises that compromise our position from a national security perspective.
And that compromise is what we heard earlier from Taiwan's president saying that a war between Taiwan and China is absolutely not an option. What do you think the politics stand, seeing as President Xi Jinping will be making a huge decision in a couple of days?
Well, I think that the most important thing is that the election in China goes forward with President Xi Jinping winning the election. So he needs to have a strong anti-Western position. So the trip with Nancy Pelosi put him in a position. The Chinese Communist Party wants to know, can President Xi Jinping lead? Can he push back against the West, and is he willing? But how far is he willing to push back? We saw Russia as a natural aggressor pushing against the West. The question now becomes, President Xi, how far will you go to also push back against the West now that they're encroaching in territory like Taiwan and they're causing problems from the perspective of national security? We want to see you lead. We also want to see you take an aggressive stance, and he will have to answer that question, how he will deliver in terms of response to this.
Adam, we'd like to thank you. Adam Roosevelt is a foreign affairs commentator. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
Let's go over to the U.S. now, where former U.S.